Welcome to the Westeros Media Podcast, Lessons from the Ashes. We are here to tell the Phoenix Rising stories, coming up from the ashes to build businesses, to build personal brands, to parent, coming out, all of it. The stories of those who came from nothing and did great things. We all have a Phoenix Rising story, and I can't wait to hear yours. Join me every week for new podcast episodes. And of course, make sure you follow the show so that you never miss an episode. See you soon.
Okay. Hi, and welcome back to Lessons from the Ashes, a Westeros Media podcast. I am so excited to have a new guest here for season 2 of the show. Trish, welcome, and please can you introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and where you are from?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited. I actually grew up in Ontario, but I've been based in Banff, Alberta, in the beautiful Rocky Mountains of Canada for the last, 12 years. And I am a speaker and mindfulness teacher, and I travel around. I teach mindfulness in conference settings. I do keynote speeches, workshops, and then a lot of my work is teaching workplaces, organizations, how to use mindfulness as really a resilience building tool, how to manage stress better, how to avoid burnout, how to manage, honestly, just like the stuff that comes up in life, like anxiety and overwhelm and all of that. Just really helping folks with some really transformative coping skills, essentially.
That's amazing. And I think so needed in this world, this climate that we're in at the moment. Okay, so we did chat before this, but the whole theme of the podcast is the lessons from the ashes. Like, what did we learn along the way that we can pass on to others so that we can all escape the ashes and rise as our beautiful phoenix with a little more grace than before we heard these stories. And also just to normalize that, like, you know, all of these things happen to everybody. Nobody has this perfect life that they show on the internet. So I would love it if you could share with everybody a little bit of your story and your Phoenix Rising story.
Yeah, I mean, no one gets out of this life without being taken to their knees probably multiple times.
Yeah, in my experience, yes.
The biggest story for me really happened about 12 years ago, and it was the sudden loss of my mom. She passed away of breast cancer, and it was incredibly sudden. She actually went through chemotherapy treatments, and she went actually through total reconstructive surgery, and the doctors were like, we caught it really early. You're going to be just fine. You know, they gave us, her family, the most impossible task ever, not to worry. And, you know, she had gone through this kind of 18-month hellish journey, and she was actually on the other side of it. She'd had her reconstructive surgery. We were like ready to celebrate that this whole, you know, horrible experience, 18 months, was over. And she started to feel unwell. And she went back to the doctors, and she went back for the whole barrage of tests, and everything honestly kind of crumbled within, I would say, 30 days, where they told us she, you know, the cancer had returned, it had spread. And by the time I flew back to Ontario to be with her, I had 10 days, and then she was gone. And so that was an incredibly pivotal moment in my life. I had already been studying mindfulness, meditation techniques, these kind of intentional living practices and ways of being. But that moment, I think I had never before that moment. So my mom was 55 when this happened. She was so young. And I had never considered before, like I'd never even entertained the thought that like I wasn't going to get to live 70, 80, 90 years of my life. You know, the only other close person who we had lost was my grandfather. He was in his 70s. He'd lived like a very long, full life. And I didn't even realize I had this belief that was just in my bones that like, oh yeah, we all get that. Like that's guaranteed. And so my mom's loss, like I always say, and I talk about this in my talks and my keynotes, that this this phrase kept echoing in my mind after she was gone. And it's actually from a poem. It's from a Mary Oliver poem. And the phrase is this: what are you going to do with this one precious life that you've been given? Yeah. So it was in that moment of losing her when she was only 55, so young, that it really hit me like, this life is precious, and not just this
Mhm.
life. Like, I think we talk about our lives as like this big thing, but our lives are actually just a culmination of moments, little moments that add up and add up and add up, and that becomes your life. So what that really means is that every moment of your life is extremely precious and matters so much. And I couldn't help but just think that maybe I wasn't doing it justice. And what I really realized in the months and honestly the years following her death was just that one of the ways I was kind of wasting my moments was I had this kind of like bad relationship, negative relationship with stress that I now realize almost everybody does, which is that we experience a stressful moment. Again, right? Our life is made up of moments. So stressful moments exist in our lives, they're non-negotiable. But what I had noticed I was doing is like stress was almost like leaving a residue in my like mind, in my body, in my heart. You know, say I had all this like neck and shoulder tension that I couldn't get rid of, even however many massages I got, like those knots would return. I'd even be on the massage bed being like, oh, this is so lovely and relaxing. And then I'd start thinking about, you know, some worst case scenario playing out in the future. And then all the knots would return. Or I'd have trouble sleeping because my mind would just be spinning with, again, those worst case scenarios, those anxious thoughts that would lead me to, you know, feeling anxiety, feeling worry, feeling overwhelmed. And so I really realized that in many ways, stress was dictating not just the moments of my life when a stressor was present, but even other moments of my life when I was like trying to relax and trying to enjoy my life. I just, you know, all these thoughts were kind of cascading through my mind, spinning through my mind. And I really realized in that moment that I actually had access to a tool that could probably help me manage that a little bit better, which was mindfulness, which is simply these, you know, this whole kind of set of practices and techniques that can encourage our mind to be more present in each moment of our lives instead of dwelling on the past. Why did it happen that way? Wish it had happened differently. What if this had happened in the past? Where would I be now? And how would that have, or worrying about the future? How are things going to play out? Is my family going to be okay? My finances, my career, the world, the economy. You know, we can spend so much of our time, and I was not mentally present. So it was really that moment of like, okay, maybe I don't have as much control as I thought over like the quantity of my life, like over the number of years that are going to, you know, fulfill this life, but maybe I have access to a really powerful tool that can enhance the quality of my life. So that's when I really became just so committed to not only my own practice of mindfulness, but having this purpose of spreading it and sharing it and taking it as far and wide as I could, because it has been such a positive influence in my own life.
That's amazing. What a story. And thank you for sharing that. I know that can't be easy to talk about all of that. And I love how you're talking about like breaking it down into those little moments because I feel that too. I'm like, when are the big moments? Like, are they all those moments? Did I miss them? Like, did they all come together? And it's almost like you don't know which are the big moments until like afterwards, and you're like, oh, that was it. I I was there, but was I
Right.
there?
Right. It's like this nostalgia, right? We think back
Yeah.
to like, oh, that was such a sweet moment. Oh, that was such a good moment of my life. But like, while it was unfolding, did we notice that? And
Hmm.
we can't go back in time and go back and be grateful for it in the moment. But what we can do is we can be present and grateful for these moments that are unfolding in our life as they unfold.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And this has been like really on my mind lately, especially with like there's just so much happening in the world. And I'm like, part of me is like, I just want to like not think about any of it. And then the other part of me is like, well, I can't like ignore it. but like, I want to be like, I don't want to like miss my kid's childhood because I was stressing about something happening across the other side of the world. And I also don't want to be like that guy who's like, I'm not going to think about it. And I find that like, especially like raising kids and running a business, I'm like, every moment counts.
Yeah.
And I look back at my own childhood memories and I'm like, okay, like I don't remember big things. I remember all the small things, you know, the little tiny things like sitting on the counter while my mom makes biscuits and stuff like that. And then I'm like, but what are my kids going to remember? And then I'm like, oh man, now I have to like be in all the moments. Like, do you ever get people who are like almost a little overwhelmed with having to be like present in all the moments? Well,
I mean, yes, but also that is, it's impossible. It's totally
right.
impossible to actually like have 100% success in being mindful. It literally is impossible. So we kind of just need to like give ourselves a break and like remember our humanity. Like we
Right.
have these, I mean, part of what makes us a human is literally, I think one of the words, so for human is like Homo sapiens sapien, and it means we think. But we don't just think, we know that we think,
Oh,
right? So like I have a dog. I don't have kids. I have a dog. She thinks, I can tell. She's thinking about going outside when she has to pee. She's thinking about what's, you know, when she's going to get her treat at night. But does she know that she thinks? Like, can she be like, oh, right now I'm thinking about that bone that I'm waiting for, you know, to get as my after dinner treat? No, but humans have that capacity. We have the ability to know. It's like we're laying in bed and we're anxious about this meeting, whatever our boss, I don't know, scheduled a one-on-one tomorrow. We have this ability to lay in bed and be thinking, oh my gosh, getting fired. It's bad feedback about this. They're probably going to get mad at me for this, blah, blah, blah. We have the ability to stop and go, huh, that's interesting. Right now, I can't stop thinking about this meeting tomorrow. So our brain is incredibly powerful, and it's actually a good thing, right? We want to be able to reflect into the past intentionally, right? We want to be able to look at the past in our lives and go, maybe when I said that thing, when I lost my, you know what, because my kid broke the lamp or whatever, maybe next time I want to act a little differently, right? Maybe I should work on that. Or we also want to be able to plan into the future, set goals, visualize vision for what we want in the future of our life, plan and take action. These are really important capabilities of our mind. And I think sometimes when we talk about mindfulness and we put it up on this pedestal, like we want to be present in every moment, we can forget that actually it's really important, and it's a good thing our mind can go into the past and into the future. However, what we don't want is our mind just doing that at any given moment without our permission, without our intention, because then, like you said, we're going to miss out on all these moments of our life, right? Because we're taking a nice stroll through the forest with our family and we can't help but think about all the tasks we have to do at work tomorrow. That's not helpful. It is helpful for us if we want to sit down, reflect on the past, think of the future. So I think that just saying all that to like take the pressure off, like there's no perfect world where anybody, me as a teacher, my teachers who've been, you know, practicing and teaching mindfulness for decades, their minds are not 100% present. It's just impossible. But it is possible to strengthen the ability for our mind to be more present in the moments when we want it to, right? That moment where we're on holiday, when we're on vacation, we want to be really present with our family. That moment where we're getting that little, you know, hug, that squeeze from our kid or our spouse or our parent, and we want to be really present instead of being like, oh, yep, okay, get this over with because I have something else to do. So yeah, it's not 100%. It's not perfect. Yeah.
I like that perspective of like not giving your mind permission to
Right.
just like go wild, because I feel like I finally like I had like quite a bit of anxiety previously in my life, and I feel like this like section of my life is like the first time that I felt like I'm not like in a rush to like get. I always felt, even like for exciting things, I was like excited to get to the fun thing, but then in the exciting moment I was like excited for it to be over so I could like think about it or talk about it, or like, you know, like I was just like always in a rush, like so in a rush for the next thing. And then I was like, where did the last like 5 years go, you know?
Yeah.
And I find that like it's a hard trap, because you want to be excited for the things that are coming up, you know, and like for like the future, but like where's the like the line? Like, how can you not give I like that permission thing. Like, so how would you help your brain do that?
Yeah. So it's really about like, so another word, mindfulness is such like a buzzword. I usually, when I speak to groups, I'll usually do like, if I'm virtual, I do little polls, or if I'm in person, I literally am getting people to raise their hands. So I'll say like, how many people here have heard the word mindfulness before? And I literally get like almost 100% of people like, yep, heard it, saw it on Time Magazine, saw it in a blog, saw it on social media, whatever. Then I'm like, okay, great. That's a start. How many of you would feel confident like providing a definition? If someone were to ask you, but what the heck is it? Would you like pipe up and say something? And then literally like more than half of people's hands go down. So I'm like, okay, here we are. We have officially entered what I call buzzword territory. Like we all know what it is, but everyone's like, but I don't really know what it is. And then I'll usually ask, and are you practicing it? Because mindfulness is like, it's kind of like playing a sport or playing an instrument. Like the people who are going to be able to embody it the most are the ones who are in the practice of it. But another word we could use for mindfulness is like intentionality, right? Which intentionality is like just the opposite of autopilot. So autopilot is like my big smart brain, my big smart human brain that can do all these like fancy things. It just gets to do whatever the heck it wants, whenever the heck it wants. And what we know about the brain is that whatever you think about grows. Whatever you think about grows. The way scientists put it is they say neurons that fire together in your brain wire together. So what that means is if you're on autopilot and every day you're driving to and from work, and every day you sit there driving to and from work and your mind starts to just spin with anxious, worrisome thoughts, those neurons are firing and wiring together. What you think about grows. Now, the chances that tomorrow when you drive to and from work, you're going to think about anxiety-provoking thoughts just increased. Then you do it again tomorrow. Then the chance that you're going to drive again the next day and think anxiety grows. What you think about becomes the inclination of your mind. So the problem is when we're on autopilot and we're just kind of letting our mind do whatever the heck it wants to do, it can start to create some unhelpful patterns. Our brain is literally wired to trend negatively because of survival mechanisms. So 2 out of every 3 thoughts you think, that's the rough scientific number, is that 2 out of every 3 of those thoughts are negative. Worries, fears, right? Concerns, worst case scenarios playing out. So the intentionality becomes, how do I actually pay attention? Remember, we're humans and we think and we know that we think. Mindfulness is about becoming aware of what you're thinking, knowing what you're thinking. Oh, here I am in the car thinking that anxiety-provoking thoughts. I'm firing those neurons together. They're wiring together. What I think is going to become the inclination of my mind. So now, instead of being on autopilot, I'm going to take a moment, maybe just feel the steering wheel under my hands. As soon as I do that, as soon as I connect to a sense, right? Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. As soon as I connect to one of those senses, I'm right here, because that sense is unfolding right in this present moment, right? The steering wheel is warm under my hands, or I've got the window cracked open and I can feel a breeze on my face. And again, as you fire those neurons together, you wire them together. The more often you practice remaining present in the moment, or just simply kind of tuning or orienting your mind to the present moment, the easier that gets. And so it's an intentional thing, right? It's not just like, oh, my mind gets to do whatever. I'm actually making a choice that instead of feeding these anxiety-provoking thoughts, I'm going to turn, we can choose where we put our attention. Even the people who are listening to this right now, they could choose to really focus their attention on my voice, or they could choose to really focus their attention on a sound they hear in their environment. Maybe they've got kids in another room that are laughing and playing. Or maybe they're standing, they could really shift their attention right now to feeling their feet on the ground. That's the power we have as human beings. We choose where we put our attention. So mindfulness is just more regularly choosing where we put our attention so that our mind doesn't get to just, again, kind of do whatever it wants. We get to make a conscious, intentional choice. Long answer.
No, it's perfect. We got all the time in the world. I really like that because I think, especially with all the buzzwords and stuff, like I think, you know, everybody is like using mindfulness as like, you know, their own ad campaign now, right? Like you
Sure.
see like chocolate bars, they're like, take your mindful moment. And I'm like,
Sure.
what? Really? Are we okay?
Yeah.
But I think it's harder when you're actually like going through the drudgery of like the day to day to like remember that. I know that I get that way. Like I know in my brain that like I should be mindful, and I like know that I should be like doing all of these exercises. And then sometimes I get to the end of the day and I was like, I wasn't mindful even once.
Right.
So
So
well,
this is where meditation comes in. And some people immediately will go, oh God, pause. No, not listen. Don't pause yet. Listen, keep listening. People have lots of preconceptions of meditation, but I like to give an analogy. So let's say you go through your day and I don't know, maybe you want to redecorate your living room and you want to move your couch from one side to another. And you go, okay, great, I'm going to go do this. Or maybe you want to play with your kids and they're saying, Mom, pick me up, pick me up. And they're getting heavier moment by moment, day by day, because they're growing. And you want to do that physical skill with your body. You want to move your couch from one side of your living room to another, or you want to pick up your kid, but you can't, right? You go to do it and you're like, oh, I'm so weak, right? Maybe what might pop into your head at that moment, what do you know? If you're like, I'm too weak to lift up my kid, or I'm too weak to move this, and it's something I really want to do, what would you need to do to solve that?
get stronger.
Get stronger. How do you get stronger?
Lift super big weights in the gym.
Wait, amazing. Do some form of exercise, right? So this is, I think, where the rubber meets the road of mindfulness. I don't know a single soul who has said to me, nah, I don't really need to be more present in my life and I don't want to. It doesn't sound great. It doesn't sound like it's for me. I swear everyone I talk to says, I want this. How? And mindfulness says, if you were to take now, exercise, what's the minimum amount of time most people do physical exercise for? I'd argue maybe 15, 20 minutes. You don't even need that much time for mindfulness. If you want to start to be more present in your life, mindfulness says, great, I have an exercise for that. It's not lifting weights. It's not going for a run. It's not going to the CrossFit box gym. It's not going to yoga. It's not stretching. It's not getting on a stationary bike. It's actually a mental exercise. And you really need only do it, in my experience, a couple minutes a day. But when you're in that practice of doing that, just like if you're in a practice of lifting some weights, then in your day, in the moment, real life, you want to move that couch, you're strong enough. You want to pick up your kid, you're strong enough. So meditation is like the little exercise we can do for our brain so that when we're living our life, interacting with our coworkers, our family, on vacation, wherever we are, we can actually access that skill, just like we'd access the strength to be able to lift up our furniture and move it over. We can actually access the mindfulness skill. But if we haven't practiced it, it's really quite hard to access because life is really fast paced. There's a lot of challenges flying at us, lots of kind of chaos. Life inherently, its very nature is that it's chaotic and everything's always changing and it's unpredictable and it's volatile. So we can't really expect to be able to access mindfulness if we haven't practiced it, just like we can't expect to be able to access physical strength unless we've actually honed it previously.
Okay, so I like how you've explained this because even though I have done meditation for like a couple years, not like super successfully, but I do try, I for sure thought it was like, you're supposed to like get in that groove and then like that's supposed to last the whole day. Not like, I thought it was like you fill up the little tank and then you use it the whole day, but it's like an exercise. I like, okay.
Training your brain. Again, remember, neurons that fire together wire together.
Right.
So sit in the morning. I do my practice in the morning, but you can do it anytime. That's a big question. People are like, when's the best time? I'm like, the time that you're going to do it is the best time. If you're not a morning person, don't you dare tell yourself you're going to do it in the way it's not going to work. So when you sit and you make that time each day, you're practicing noticing your mind wander, bringing it back to the present moment. Oh, there it goes. It wanders, bringing it back. Then you're going to get into your life and you're strengthening that skill. So then you're in the car driving home and you're noticing your mind wander to anxiety provoking thoughts. And you're like, whoa, 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 wait, come back to the present moment. And you're able to do that because you've already practiced it.
Oh man. Okay, that's a really good reframe. I just had not thought of or heard of it like that before. Okay, so lots of the people who listen to the podcast are
Mhm.
entrepreneurs and run their own business.
Okay.
So do you have any suggestions for like specifically people who are like in the chaos of like running a whole business whilst also doing life? Like
Yes.
where would you start?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, shameless promo, and on the video here, you can see I have a little journal that I've created. It's called the Mindful Mornings Journal. I created it in the fall of 2020, but it really is based on practices, regular daily practices I was doing long before the pandemic started. But during the pandemic, I had an influx of folks. I mean, it's not rare. People often come to mindfulness when they're going through a crisis. I shared my own story, Yes, I
Mhm.
was practicing mindfulness already, but it was like really losing my mom and having that crisis that really committed me. So people were coming to me in the pandemic being like, I what am I doing right now? I can't manage my stress, my anxiety is out of control. We are put face to face with the complete uncertainty of life. And that is really provoking for our brain that likes to think about the past, worry about the future. And so I thought, well, I already have this kind of routine that I do. Why don't I put it into, an actual kind of instruction manual? And so I created this journal, and it really takes you through 4 what I would call mindful, or like I've said earlier in our conversation, intentional habits, right? Things that we're choosing to do intentionally. And honestly, I don't know how people run businesses without a mindfulness practice or any of these things that are in this journal, because it has just saved me so many times from like throwing in the towel and being like, I'm done. So it starts with a mindfulness practice, or you could call it a meditation, something where you actually sit down, you stay for as little as 1 minute and practice a technique. As many as, I don't know, you want to do 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you have that time, beautiful. But it's flexible. It's as little as 1 minute of a mindfulness technique, a meditation. Then it goes into a gratitude practice. So remember how I was saying, if you practice a meditation, you've trained your mind to be present, then during the day, it's going to be easier. That's kind of like a gratitude practice too, right? When we train our mind to look for the positive things that are occurring in our life, then as our day unfolds, we start to see them a little easier. It's kind of the same thing. So there's a gratitude practice. There is a goal setting practice, because as much as I think it's important to be present in our lives, I also think it's really important to plan out where we're headed and be taking intentional steps today to get us where we want to go in the future. So there's a really powerful goal setting method. And then at the end, right but before you're about to go on with your day, there's something I call a daily intention setting practice. And the prompt is this. It says, no matter what unfolds today, that's just a reminder to people that our life is uncertain. We never really know what's going to happen, because we all have our calendars. We think we know. We're like, I have this,
Ugh.
that meeting, this thing, kids soccer, kids hockey, whatever. That No, we don't know. We
Ugh. Preach.
So
Yeah.
it says, no matter what unfolds today, I want to show up with this quality or these qualities. And then you get a chance to sit for a moment and think intentionally, how do I want to show up for myself today, for my loved ones, for my coworkers, for a stranger I meet out on the street? How do I actually want to live this day? And maybe you write a sentence, or maybe you write a word, something to anchor you, something to kind of take your aim towards. And again, just like having your mind in the present moment. Are you going to be perfect? Are you going to live the next 24 hours? You write calm. Are you going to be calm perfectly for the next? No. But at least you've taken aim at something. At least you've kind of made a decision. And for me, chances are I actually hit that target I aimed at more, not always, but more than I would if I never took an aim in the first place. So that's one way, just because it's really guided, a great way for people to kind of start incorporating some of these mindful, intentional techniques into their life. And what I find so powerful about mindfulness when it comes to running a business is we all have these like inner critic voices, judgmental voices, whatever you want to call it, your inner saboteur, whatever you want to call it. They can eat away at us. And if we are not, or if I'll speak for myself, if I'm not in a practice of noticing my thoughts and knowing that they're not always true, sometimes they're just old stories in my head. Sometimes there's someone else's voice who I've taken on and they're in my, I would believe them. And if I believed all the critical, judgmental, harsh thoughts that go through my head on a weekly, monthly basis, I would not still be running my business. I would have quit a long, long time ago, because those voices can be mean. It's like having a mean roommate living in your head. Right?
Oh,
And for me, it's been so powerful because it's reminded me that those are just thoughts. Thoughts are not always true. I do not have to believe them. I don't have to act based on them. The thought of I'm a failure. Why am I doing this? I should just go get a job at Starbucks. Right? It's just a thought.
yeah.
And it's just kind of like being able to relate to your thoughts like weather that moves through the sky, right? Oh, today it's cloudy and stormy. Yep. Tomorrow it might be a clear blue sky day. Yep. Next day it might be a blizzard, right? We've all got these kind of weather patterns in our head. And I find these practices really help me to take all those thoughts a little less seriously and remind me to orient myself back to what really matters to me, which is really aligning myself with this purpose of teaching these tools and techniques. And that's honestly why I even still have a business. So I don't know how people do it without.
Yeah, I think that's something that people don't talk about enough, is they think, oh, I have this idea and I have
Mhm.
something I'm passionate about and I'm going to start a business. How hard could it be? And honestly, I think that like 90% of people who end up quitting, it's because their own head told them they couldn't.
That's right.
Like the amount of people who come to me like, oh, like I would, but I can't because insert every excuse ever, right? And
And in their
90%,
own way.
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
all just, they don't think that they can.
Yeah.
Because like, really, if you look at all the amazing people, they're just simply the people who are like, well, I'm going to do it anyway.
That's right. And when they've failed and they've continued, right? They haven't let failure stop them dead in their tracks, right? That's something I always often come back to. It's like, Trish, the only people who are more successful than you, it's not that they've never failed. They just have never let the failures stop them to a dead stop. They've kept going and they've learned from those. So mindfulness can even be helpful to help us just kind of retrain and refire and wire some of these thoughts in our mind so that maybe that starts to become your default thought instead of your default thought being, well, who am I to run a successful business? And I'm just going to fail. And I've failed at everything I've ever done in my life. And I don't know how. And I don't, right? We can start to kind of rewire some new, supportive, encouraging thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. This is really interesting because I've been really doing like a lot of challenges and workshops around like consistency and like helping people stay consistent and like using their confidence at the same time. And one thing that I really noticed is like the people who come in and they're like, oh, I'm bad at social media. I, need help with my business. And I'm like, okay. And then they go through this whole thing and they have this literal proof. Like I make them use a checklist because I'm like, you have to be able to look back. And by the end, they're like, oh, I suck at social media. I'm like, but you just posted every single day for the last 90 days. And they're like, oh yeah, I guess maybe I'm good at this. I'm like, yes, like that's why like I used to only teach consistency. Now I'm like, no, we need more than that in here because
mindset.
You can post, you can do the thing every single day and still think that your brain is still telling you didn't do it. Like it blows my mind the amount of people who are like, I'm terrible at this. I'm like, but you've been doing it every day for a year and like, look how much better you are. And they're like, huh.
Yeah, they haven't even noticed the shift.
It's like they didn't notice how much they've grown.
And they've been thinking those kind of negative thoughts.
Yeah.
Long. And another way for you and for your listeners to think about this is every time you think, so let's pick one of those like thoughts that an entrepreneur would have. Like I suck at social media. Okay.
Yeah.
Every time they think that thought, I've totally thought that thought before. Every time they think that thought, I want you to picture your mind like a garden. Your mind's a garden. And thoughts that are like, I'm good at this. I can do this. I can learn this. I'm good at what I do. Those kinds, supportive, helpful thoughts are like the flowers you want to see grow in your garden, or the tomatoes or the cucumbers or the nourishing things, right? Every time you think a thought like, I suck at social media, that's like a weed. And every time you think, no matter which thought you think, the flowers or the weeds, it's like you're pouring water and fertilizer on it. And what does that do? It makes it grow bigger. So
Right.
every time, and there's like some statistic, like we think roughly 80 to 90,000 thoughts a day. And then like 90% of those are the same thoughts we thought yesterday. It's because we're watering them. Every time you think it, you're watering it. And it's growing, growing, growing. And eventually, for some of us, those weeds take over, right? The whole garden. And that's really those moments where it's like, I'm just ready to work at Starbucks.
Yeah.
But we can also water the flowers, right? And that is a lot of this practice too. But first is becoming aware of what kind of thoughts are even in my head. And then how can I actually be intentional about what I want to fill my mind?
Oh, yeah, that's so interesting because I think a lot of people, they don't even realize, like I know that for sure. Like I feel like there was chunks of my life where I was just on autopilot and I look back and I'm
That's right.
like I had pictures, but I don't know what happened, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that's
And
like
it's
kind of sad to think about.
that's right. Well, what are we missing? We're missing our literal life, right?
Yeah.
You were saying a little ways back, you were saying, I'm looking forward to this and I'm looking forward to that. And I can't wait for this thing that's coming in the future. And we somehow kind of get in this delusion that when I get there, maybe it's like, oh, I can't wait, I'm going to Hawaii. Actually, I'll just use a perfect example, a real example. My family is taking a trip to Jamaica in 3 weeks. So if all I do right now, 3 weeks from my vacation, if all I do is sit here and dream about, oh, it's going to be so nice to be there, what am I training my mind to do? Think into the future. But then I have this
Mm.
delusion that when I get there, I'm going to somehow be able to be mentally present. Except for the last 3 weeks or 2 months or 6 months, maybe, I've been training my mind how to think about the future. So what's going to happen when I get onto the beach of Jamaica? My mind's going to think about the future. And I'm going to be like, what are those emails? Who's emailing me? What am I missing right now with work? And how am I going to catch up when I get, right? Every
Mm.
moment we're training our mind. So if we don't want to miss the really sweet moments of our life, we kind of also have to be present for the moments that maybe are a little boring. That's a thing in our society. No one wants to be bored, right? We can't be present with our own, so we're like distracting ourselves. And we also have to be present for the moments that kind of suck sometimes, right? Because the truth is there are moments in life that are sucky. But if we can
Yeah.
be present for those, they're actually not as difficult as we make them out to be when we're trying to like get away from them and avoid them, and just be present. And then the nature of the world is change. So even in a sucky moment, we can have hope that this will not last forever. I can be
Mhm.
present now. And then when things improve, I'll be able to be present then. And then things will maybe get sucky again. And I mean, that's life, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a whole series of ups and downs. But what I've found for myself is doing my best to be as present as I can for all those moments, even though I'm more present for the sucky moments. It's like it's actually enhanced my life. Instead of trying to run away from the sucky moments and like get more good moments and kind of cling to and, really try to strive for all those good ones and avoid the bad. It's like, I'm just going to do my best to be present for it all.
Yeah, I had a moment recently where I was like really upset, like so sad, but it was like for a good reason because I had met somebody and then I was like, I had to like say goodbye. And then I was like, this is like the most sad and happy I've been in a really long time. And I was like sitting there and I was like, I can't experience the happy without the sad right now. And it was like this weird, like clarifying moment for me because I was like, like you can't have the good without the bad. And if I ignore it, then I don't get the good.
That's
And
right.
yeah, it was like really like light bulb moment for me.
This this is such a throwback. I don't even know what year this movie came out, but I was younger and it's called Vanilla Sky. It's a Tom Cruise movie.
Oh yeah.
I remember I should go watch it again. I'd like
Yeah, now I want to too.
but there's a phrase in that movie that I think just like it gives a conciseness to what you just said. And they said, without the bitter, the sweet ain't as sweet.
Oh, love that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to name the episode.
Beautiful.
Hey, I love this. Okay, so if somebody in business is like, I'm like in my whole garden's weeds, like where do I even start?
Yeah.
So they buy your journal and then what else do they do?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. They can go through it. So basically the first like 10 pages are an explanation of like why I made the journal, what each of the practices are, how to do them. And then it's all prompts. And again, like I usually like to say it could take you as little, like really, it could probably take you as little as 3 minutes a day. Or if you want to extend it, so the mindfulness practice part of it is the kind of adjustable part. So you could make it a minute, you could make it 5, 10. So however much time you have in a day, you can kind of extend it or contract it as you need to. And I would say start to go through it. You know, I think there's about, if you go through every page, if you were to complete the whole journal, every prompt page, it's about 4 months of pages.
Oh, wow.
I often suggest people like, don't force yourself to do it every single day, but try to do it daily-ish, right? So maybe 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and just start to notice things like how you're relating to your life as you go through it. Often what I hear from people is even before they notice a benefit, actually other people start to say things to them.
Oh.
Their spouse, their coworkers, sometimes their kids are like, what are you doing differently? Like you're different.
What's going on here?
You're more calm, you're like happier. What's happening here? And people are often curious. So, you know, honestly, I would just say start there. It's a really simple practice. And I would encourage people to not assume that something that's small and simple, like again, I said it could take you like 3 or 5 minutes in the morning to go through the prompts. Don't assume that something small like that does not have profound impacts on the way you live your life. And I often give this example, like think about brushing your teeth, right? Because I think we so easily think, oh, I'm so stressed, I'm so anxious, I'm so overwhelmed, I need a big change. I need to quit my job, I need to move to Mexico, I need to live on the beach. That's how I'm going to be happy. That's how I'm going to be stress-free. And it's like, I mean, I guess there's people doing that, but like that's big. And then we think, oh, doing, 2 minutes of meditation, that's not going to change anything. Do you know how stressed I am? And I get that. I have compassion for that. But think about brushing your teeth, right? I spend a total of 4 minutes every day brushing my teeth. 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes at night. It's timed for me because I have one of those, fancy electric toothbrushes. So it's no less than 2 minutes and 2 minutes. And that's a very small amount of time. We might think, what can we do in 4 minutes that's going to change? But that has a really big impact on my dental health, right? I also go to the dentist a couple times a year. That's important. Do a little flossing, not as much as I should. But so let's not assume that a small change in your life can't have pretty big impacts. I now, I started my meditation practice very small. I started with 1 minute a day because it's all I could handle because the noise up there was so much, like to sit for a minute and notice my thoughts was overwhelming as it was. And then I slowly added a minute at a time when I felt ready. At this point, I'm like over a decade into my practice, again, daily-ish, not every single day, but daily-ish. And I've worked my way up to 10 minutes. And I find that I actually have not added on time. I'm finding that a 10-minute investment of my time seems, for me, the magic number where it's like, it's not too much. When I say to myself, I'm going to do 10 minutes in the morning, it's not like, oh my God, where am I going to find that time? It's too much. I have too many things. It works for me on that level. And it also works for me in that as my day unfolds, as I go about my work, my interactions, my relationships, I find that 10 minutes is like an investment of time. So then when I show up to a podcast, to a call with my friends, to my husband while we're making dinner, I'm a lot better able to be present during those moments. Again, not perfect, but I'm a lot better able. So starting small, like I mean, 10 minutes for your whole day. And again, you don't have to start there. You can work up. You can start at 1 minute, 2 minutes and work up, but it really can have a massive transformative effect on your life. And I would also invite people, if they're skeptical, it's like, prove me wrong. Try it. Try it and come back to me after a couple months and tell me it didn't work. Tell me it didn't have a positive effect on your life. There's so much data out there. There's so many studies. Since really, I guess the 70s is when mindfulness really started coming into the Western world, into America and into Canada. And now there's just thousands of studies that are all pointing in the direction of really positive benefits physiologically, like our body, blood pressure lowering, heart rate lowering, cholesterol lowering, to like emotional benefits, to mental benefits, reduced anxiety and stress, and better communication, better resilience. It's just, yeah, it's like, I don't know. In my head at this point, I'm like, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you take a couple minutes to maybe try something that could have so many positive benefits?
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's a good challenge. Prove me wrong.
Prove me wrong.
Well, and we've been having a lot of conversations lately about like this all or nothing mentality, that people are like, the only way to change anything is to change everything. And I'm like, no, man, like that's how you get into such a trap, because something so small can change everything, right? Like whether it's, committing to like a couple minutes a day, like as if you can't do that. Like that's 3 TikToks you didn't watch. Like, come on, as if you can't do that. But I think it's just like people think that they can't, so they don't even like want to try, because they're like, oh, it'll never help. But I like that challenge. So
again, that's a thought, right?
Yeah,
like,
the negative thought starts it.
Yeah, it's like that very thought that's preventing you from doing it. Like that's the thing that you could actually start to like question and become aware of should you do it. This. I think you're so right. Like I get that too. I did back in January. I used this like yoga app, and it has breath work too. And they had a challenge, and it was like an everyday January thing. And I was like, I'm gonna do this. And by the end of January, I think I completed like 19 or 20 days. And I reflected, and I actually did a post on Instagram about it, because I thought like we need to shift our perspective around goals, because I could very easily go like, that was a 31-day challenge. I only did 20 days. I completely failed. But what was actually true, and again, I was able to challenge this thought probably because of practicing meditation and mindfulness, instead of just thinking that thought and then feeling like a failure and then spiraling into shame. I was like, well, hold on. And I challenged that thought. And I realized that what's actually true is that had I not intended to do that challenge in the first place, I wouldn't have even done a single day, let alone 20. So what I actually did was I did 20 days. It's not that I didn't do 31 days. I did 20 days, which is more than I would have done had I not even decided to do it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yes. I think that's so important, because it's like, usually like, because I work with entrepreneurs, so like they're all like big personalities and they got like big dreams, and then you like want them to do something simple and they're like, no, thank you, I will not be doing that.
It's almost like they're the big picture dreamers, and then they need their, I almost said minions. That sounds really bad. That I don't mean that negatively.
No, yeah.
Like people to execute. They need people. Actually, this is interesting. You've just got me reflecting, because I'm really good at that part of it. Like I think I'm able to dream big, but I'm also really good at like executing and ticking things off and being like, Kate, we did that little thing and that little thing. And now look at all the little things I did, and they're adding up. Right.
Yeah.
And even that comes back to mindfulness. I feel like I could draw everything back to mindfulness, but like your life is a collection of moments. You have a new moment all the time. This is another thing we get stuck in, I think, is like new year, I'm going to start a new habit. Start of the month.
New year, new me.
Start of the week. I need a Monday to start a new habit. It's like, do you know what you're actually given? Every second is a new moment. Every second you get a new moment. And every time you have a new moment, you have a new choice. You can choose to do in this next moment that we're all entering together. You can choose something completely different than you've ever chosen before if you want to. What's really holding you back? There might be a few things, but it's like new moment, new choice. Don't need to wait for a Monday. We don't need to wait for the start of a month, start of a year, our birthday. These are arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when we hit the start of a new year, it's like, why is that so powerful? Well, it's because we're really aware of time passing, but time's passing right now too.
Mhm. Yeah, I find that so much because people are like, oh, how is it already March? How is it already this? And I'm like, yeah, like it's like people lose whole chunks of their life because they're just doing the day-to-day thing. And then they're like, what is the purpose of my life? And I think instead of being like, I got to change everything to find my purpose, it's like, okay, can I like enjoy this one thing and then enjoy that next thing and then see where I end up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. This conversation has been really cool. I'm glad that you came on the podcast and told us all about it. And so if people want to learn more about you, know more of the things you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, I would say just visit my website, Tutton, TUTTON.com. I've actually got a program coming up in, I think when this podcast is released, it'll be that upcoming weekend. So I've actually got a Learn to Meditate course coming up. And
Okay.
it's a weekend course, so people can find that on my website. I run those a couple times a year. It's a total of 8 hours over a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, broken up. It's virtual, so wherever you are, you could join in. And my goal for people in that is like, again, mindfulness is so all over the place. And there's all these apps and all these YouTube recordings and all this stuff. And what I really want to teach people to do, because when I learned how to do this, it changed everything for me, is meditate on your own. No apps, no recordings. You don't need to have your device. You don't need to have downloaded this thing. You don't need to pay hundreds of dollars a year for an app. You can do it on your own, completely without any sort of support. So that's my goal in that course. So yeah, people can check that out.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on here. And so everybody, make sure you share this podcast episode with a friend. Check out the show notes. I will have the links to all of these things and to that program for you if you want to check it out. And make sure that if you are following the show, that you leave us a review and that you go follow Trish on Instagram too, because gotta share the love. Yep. Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that you have an amazing day.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Okay.
Hey, I'm Stephanie Rose, and I am the host of the Westeros Media podcast, Lessons from the Ashes. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and on Threads and on TikTok and all the places. My handle is @Westeros Media. Check out my website too. There are so many resources for people just like you, people who are climbing out of the ashes, ready to make a new life. I got you, babe. Make sure you follow along. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you never miss an episode and I can keep doing the magic. I can't wait to keep going. Let's get into it.